probably wait a few minutes to start the program, but I'm going to go ahead and do the usual PPN spiel, which is, first of all, that I'm Dave Peaty. I'm on the board of Publishing Professionals Network, and we are an all-volunteer nonprofit. We've been around for over 50 years. We started initially as Book Builders West, and really we are just here to support each other. Professionals in the publishing field. We started off with a strong production focus, but now we realize the importance of all the different aspects of publishing and how everybody should be familiar and aware of everybody else's roles. It really improves how we work together and makes it more enjoyable. I think that's a big part of what we do, is really just trying to make our work even more enjoyable than it is. So if you are interested in joining PPN, the URL, which I'll put in the chat, is pubpronetwork.org. And if you're interested in volunteering, that's great. The cost for becoming a member is outrageously expensive. It's $25 a year. If you're interested, I'd go ahead and do it now. There's been some talk of maybe raising those rates. The professional development team is the one that puts these noon Zooms together. And then there's a separate team that puts together the conference that we have every year as well. So there are lots of different ways to get involved. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker today. Simona from Asia Pacific Printing has really been a wonderful addition to the team of people who are willing to give of themselves, and started, I think you were at the conference earlier this year in April, I think it was, and we'll have another one.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself and get things started. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the Publishing Professionals Network for inviting me to share my knowledge with all of you. I especially want to thank Dave for organizing this presentation, and I hope I can deliver on all the information that has been promised. I'd also like to give a special shout out to my colleague, Veronica Haas, and the Asia Pacific Offset San Francisco office, who some of you already know. She has helped me with this presentation, and she will guide each and every one of you to bring your project to market. She's also an amazing friend and colleague, and she is truly one of a kind. So, hi, my name is Simona Gheorghiu, and just to give you a little background about myself, I did not attend university and come out thinking, I would like to work in production when I grow up. I fell into production by accident, and it has been a match made in heaven. I have worked on both sides of manufacturing, publishing, production, and sales. Therefore, I am uniquely qualified to understand your needs and have the knowledge to make your design ideas come to life in a cost-effective and creative way. I have been with Asia Pacific for 23 years, which is a very long time in the print industry. What has kept me here at the company is the company culture, the support of my colleagues, and the relationship, both personal and professional, I have made. There is no I at Asia Pacific, only we and team. Some of my favorite projects over the last 5 years, I had to narrow it down to 5 instead of my entire career. So here are just a few. Paul McCartney lyrics started before COVID, but finished and shipped during the 2021, during the height of the pandemic container and vessel shortage. The deluxe edition, the orange clamshell you see there, has a tipped-in sheet signed by Sir Paul himself. My next fun project, the McAtlas, was a hoot to work on. The book is supposed to look like a Big Mac, with the boards replicating the buns, including the raised seeds. When you touch the case, you feel the raised sesame seeds on it. The silkscreen edges on the side have lettuce, tomato, cheese, and patty with the deluxe book inserted into a cardboard slipcase. Gary, my client, he went on a press okay to China, and if you check out his Instagram page, he had daily updates, video updates of the process. He's also the winner of not just one, but two James Beard Awards of this 2025. So this my latest project in the top right corner that you see here is for distributed art publishers, and it's Archigram the magazine, an authorized replica of the 9.5 issues of Archigram Architectural Collective, packaged with a reader's guide in a clamshell box. This was one of the biggest challenges I've worked on because the way the originals were printed. The originals were printed at separate times, probably not even the same printers, with different colors, whatever paper they had available. Within the issues themselves, the colors don't match, but we had to adjust everything to modern printing techniques. One of the issues actually uses 14 different colors. Archigram will release in November 2025, and I believe you can still support the campaign on Kickstarter and reserve a copy. Now, a few things about Asia Pacific. Asia Pacific sales and production teams have worked in the publishing and printing industry for years. Many of the team I work with in China and Hong Kong have worked at Asia Pacific since 1997. Our team in Hong Kong is your eyes on the ground. Unlike Gary, who still has a budget to go on press, production budgets are slashed and press checks are mostly a thing of the past. Our QC team runs independent press checks, reviews binding, and inspects the bulk using AQL system during final packing. Our sales team have decades of experience. If you run into production conundrum, one of us will have encountered it and are quick to offer one or two solutions. Over the last 15 years, Asia Pacific has expanded our services from just book production to book plus, metal, ceramics, etc., to board games and beyond. The QC required for all these new products puts Asia Pacific in a unique position to manage and oversee various components delivery and assembly with seamless service. Even before tariffs were implemented in China, we began working to expand our network by identifying and onboarding suppliers who pass our stringent quality and social compliance requirements in various regions around the world. Um, Although I have made every effort not to overwhelm you with too much information, I want to let you know that this presentation, especially the latter half, will be very dense. So buckle up. As Dave explained, I will have time to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So, printing overseas. By the end of this hour, I hope you feel more comfortable in making informed decisions when choosing your overseas printer. Is your print vendor ready for the task? Can they produce a quality that you need? China has a long history of printing. Before Gutenberg, China was using wooden blocks to manufacture books. Over the last 50 years, China has become a key supplier in quality high-end books. Their expertise and competitive pricing has kept China on the cutting edge of book manufacturing. The US print industry continues to supply printed books to market. In the current publishing world, both US and overseas printers have their place. In many ways, they complement each other. My presentation will focus in the geographic areas that Asia Pacific has partnerships with, since each country has their own unique pros and cons. I am speaking from my own personal experience, and your mileage may vary. Now, on to the details. When I receive a call about a new project, my first question to you would be, what is your subject matter? What do you want your book to look and feel like? The content will guide where the project will be placed. Nudity in Thailand, maps or political content in Turkey or Malaysia. Once it's decided that you can print your book in any of the aforementioned regions, you will need to decide on your budget and binding. Pricing from most cost-effective to higher pricing are China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Turkey, and Thailand. On this slide, there are few examples of unique binding styles. From my own experience, publishers come to me with an idea already in mind, or sometimes they have a general thought but it's not something that's completely fleshed out. So they're looking for advice on how best to take their idea and make it come to life. When selecting your print partner, you want to look for experience. Do they understand your vision? Are they working with you to suggest materials within your budget? Sometimes adjusting your trim side by just 1/4 of an inch will save you money on the unit cost. Another consideration, does your project require handwork? The Z-fold book that you see here on the bottom right-hand corner is bound by hand. Although the sewing is done by machine, the sewing of the signatures is done by machine. Placing the boards on the case is done by hand. There is no automated machine that can place the boards on the book like this. Overall, China is unparalleled in quality and price when it comes to hand binding. Now, suppliers in different regions have different papers and binding materials available. Consider your subject matter when choosing your paper, coated versus uncoated. Some projects and images will reproduce much sharper on coated paper. Other projects will be more edgy on uncoated paper. European and US papers are more challenging to get overseas, but it's not impossible. It's best to be flexible and work with your supplier to find the perfect match. In addition, local alternatives will be the most cost effective, which means you will have extra money and in the budget for bling. The major benefits of printing in China are the flair that you can add to your project. Specialty bindings like you see on the slide, foils, spot UV, flocking, clamshells, slipcases. I could go on, but I realized we have a very limited time and I haven't even gotten to tariffs or EUDR. So we have to keep it short. Anyone brave enough can hit me up or hit me or Veronica up offline and we can geek out on production treatments. However, I do have to say, you can use your money to spend on a lot of these extra costs or these extra materials, but there is something to be said about a well-designed spot UV on a case or cover will be just as handsome and more cost-effective as foil stamping. Sometimes less is more, but other times more is amazing. Besides subject matter, binding materials, and flair, of course you need to consider printing and binding schedule as well as transit time. When quoting or discussing schedules, be very clear about your expectations. What production steps or standard operating procedure does your team follow? Clearly laying out these steps in advance will help you later down the road. If you have a gallery opening on a specific date, let your vendor know so they can work with you to make sure all the materials are released and approved in a timely fashion, and you can build that into your own schedule. So it saves you from having headaches at the end of the day. Sail time from Hong Kong to the West Coast is roughly 14 days, but don't forget about inland delivery. For the East Coast, total transit time is usually around 6 to 7 weeks. Some routes to the East Coast are routed through the Panama Canal, while sometimes it is more efficient to use rail or truck routes from the West Coast to East Coast. An additional consideration to your budget is tariffs, but more for that in a little bit. It has its own section. Now, we love cheat sheets here at Asia Pacific. Here's one we put together earlier as a handy comparison based on our experience printing overseas. As always, your mileage may vary. Now on to my favorite topic, tariffs. Tariffs are also a consideration when making a budget for your book. In this section, I will try to be as concise and also as informative as possible when it comes to tariffs and where we stand. Now, before we get too far into the weeds, I have good news. Books are exempt from the current executive order. Now to the weeds. And what does that mean? Okay, duties, tariffs versus duties. Some people use these terms interchangeably, but that is technically incorrect. Duties are a tax applied by government on goods imported regardless of country of origin. Tariffs are a tax applied by government on goods imported from a specific country. Tariffs are applied as a percentage of the manufacturing cost. So duties are on a specific item. For example, as erasers have 4.2% duties, and tariffs are applied to a country for all the goods that are imported from that country. Both are taxes levied by the government, and the income generated goes to the US government. Now, how do you determine what your tariff is, what your goods are? Um, HTS codes. Each product has its own HTS code or a harmonized tariff schedule. These codes are internationally recognized in shipping and customs. The easiest way to figure out your HTS code is to ask your supplier or your freight forwarder. But note that it's also important to perform your own due diligence by searching on the HTS website, since you are ultimately responsible for the final coding decision, since publishers are the importer of record. Here, for example, is a screen grab from the U.S. International Trade Commission website where you can access the harmonized tariff schedule. You can do a quick search for a code by typing the product you're searching for. So let's do a quick search on erasers. So here we did a search on erasers, and based on your search, you can see that the harmonized tariff schedule code for erasers is 4016920000. As mentioned previously, since duties are applied on all goods, only duties are indicated on the HTS website. The entry here confirms that there are duties of 4.2% on erasers. The tariffs, which are applied based on country of origin, are not indicated on the HTS website. For that, you'll have to reach out to your freight forwarder or supplier. As most suppliers will tell you, they can only advise you on the tariff code, and the U.S. Customs and Border Protection is the final arbiter in tariff classification matters. Knowingly misidentifying your product will result in fines and possible seizure of your imports. Now, before we move on to the slide, I wanted to just clarify the two columns that you see there under rates of duty. So, column one, rates of duty, are the standard duties applied to imports from countries with normal trade relations, while column two are duties on imports from countries without such relations. For example, North Korea, Cuba, and possibly Russia. And the special there that you see, those are exceptions. And when you actually are on their website, if you hover over each of the little letters, they will signify which country that means. I think SG, not my initials, are actually, it's Singapore. So, I have a BA and MA in history, so that then forces you to listen to me telling you on the history of the current tariffs. So, um, back in the before times, also known anything before 2018, books and many book-related items were tariff-free. But in 2018, Congress passed and signed into law the 301 Tariff Code. This law applies 25% tariffs on goods imported from China. Certain products had exemption and lower rates. For example, children's books, religious books are exempt at zero. Regular books have a reduced tariff of 7.5%. Playing cards and games are also exempt from the tariffs at 0%. Journals and other products are tariffed at 25% as outlined by the 2018 law. These rates are still in effect today. Now, the January 2025 executive order invokes the IEEPA, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The IEEPA is a U.S. federal law that allows the president to regulate international commerce during a national emergency caused by an unusual threat from outside the country. Trump is invoking the threat of fentanyl as a way to use this law to impose tariffs. Fortunately for the publishing industry, the law clearly states that informational materials are exempt from additional tariffs using this emergency power. For you, the publishers, this means that only the 301/28 tariff code applied to books imported from China. I make this easier moving forward. I will refer to the 2018 tariffs as the legacy tariffs. So now you have all this information. How are these tariffs applied? Okay, so here we have a US Customs and Entry form. So tariffs are a percentage of the manufacturing unit cost. It is not based on final invoice, pre-press, or shipping, so it's only your unit cost. Each shipment imported into the US has a custom entry form that you see here on your screen, and the duty and tariff schedules are indicated on this form. Publishers are required to pay the tariff notes immediately to the customs broker in order to have a speedy delivery. Failure to pay these in a timely fashion will result in storage fees and demurrage charges for a full container. So here's an example, and I will break it down. So the first code you see here is 99030122. This code indicates that this shipment is an informational material imported from China. Therefore, no 2025 executive order tariffs will be applied. Your next code, if this was not an informational material, the previous code above, this would have triggered the 2025 executive order of 30% tariffs, but the code above it says it's zero, so far we see free and free. Next, you have the legacy tariff code from 2018. For this shipment specifically, it's identified as reduced tariff of 7.5%. Finally, the product code identifies this shipment as books with no duties, hence the free. So, to recap, if you look at this entry form, we can deduce the following. This shipment is a book imported from China with 7.5% tariff, no duties. The total manufacturing cost is $14,723 with a tariff of $1,104.23. The 9903 codes that are highlighted above the product code, these these have different rules and tariff codes based on how each rule is applied. I don't want to get worried too much or get too much into the weeds, but um, since January 2025, products imported from China have had at least 10 different 9903 codes applied, each indicating a different rule of application. These right now are what are pretty set. By contrast, where the previous entry form had at least four different HTS code, different entry codes, this shipment here is coming from Turkey. In this entry, there are less codes, no 9903. Only the product code is applied. And since these are so this is a shipment coming from Turkey. Sorry, I skipped ahead. This is a shipment coming from Turkey. It says that exporting country. And the only code we have on there is the product code. And again, the product code says free because there are no duties under for any books imported into the US. In this instance, it looks like it's probably a full container. It's worth $20,000 and there are zero duties and tariffs to be paid on this. Now, a real world example. Okay, so I'm gonna try to be clear, not go too quickly through it. There are a lot of numbers. Okay, so we did the search earlier for an eraser. So we know the code, the HTS code for the eraser is 4016920000. The duty rate, as the HTS website told us, is 4.2% per kilogram. So we manufactured 12,000 pieces for this product. Okay. And the unit cost was 50 cents per piece. So that's a total manufacturing cost of $6,000. The total weight of the shipment was 12 kilograms. So Based on that, we had a so the duty was $2,502. 252. Sorry, so many numbers. I'm so sorry. I was like, as soon as I said it, I knew that sounded wrong. Okay. So the legacy tariff is 7.5%. Okay. We did research before. We asked our freight forwarder and they told us it's 7.5%. The 2025 executive order tariff is 20%. Then the reciprocal tariff is 10%. So your entire tariff for this shipment is 37.5%. A total of the unit cost, which is 19 cents per unit. So that equals $2,250 in tariffs plus the duties that you see above of $252. So your entire shipment of a unit cost of $6,000, you pay the customs an entry of $2,502. I know that's a lot. So, what is the current status? Where do we stand now? So, Trump signed an executive order suspending the imposition of higher tariffs on goods imported from China until 12:01 a.m. on November 10th, with all elements of the truce to remain in place up until that time. So, what about this court ruling that everyone's probably heard about? Most of the Trump global tariffs were ruled illegal by the federal appeals court and found that he exceeded his authority in imposing them, but the judges let the levy stay in place while sending the case back to the lower court for further proceedings. Trump team has asked the Supreme Court to step in and overturn the lower court. If the Supreme Court upholds the lower court ruling, meaning siding with them that the tariffs have exceeded the executive power, the government will have to pay back all the tariffs that have been collected since January 2025. Here's a chart to show you the current state of tariffs. So let's start off, let's look at first China. So right now, the fentanyl 2025, the reciprocal tariffs of 2025, so these are the executive order from this year are 30%, plus the legacy tariffs for non-book item is 25%. So most items coming from China are 55%. The other countries listed below only have reciprocal tariffs. They do not have any of the fentanyl ones. Again, because the way the 2025 executive order is implemented using the IEEPA, again, books are exempt from that, and only the legacy tariffs are applied for anything that is an informational material, which are books. Now, just a disclaimer, if someone's watching this in, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks, just keep in mind the fentanyl reciprocal tariffs, those can change at any time. So just be aware it's an evolving, especially if you're not manufacturing books, this is an evolving story. So just keep an eye out for it. Now that you've had a crash course in tariffs, we are going to go on to the next item on our agenda. Your next consideration when printing overseas or in the US is whether your book or other paper-based product will be distributed in the EU or Northern Ireland. If the answer is yes, then your book needs to comply with the European Union Deforestation Free Regulation or EUDR. To be completely transparent, as of still today, nothing has been finalized. The implementation and paper requirements are still in flux. There is no such thing as EUDR compliant papers since the final rules for the paper and pulp requirements have not been finalized. Having said that, there are EUDR ready papers, meaning some mills are ready to provide all the information needed once everything is approved and the implementation has been confirmed. So, what is EUDR exactly? EUDR is an initiative to eliminate deforestation and biodiversity loss by implementing more sustainable trade practices. The regulation applies to materials and their derivative products. For the scope of this presentation, our main focus will be on wood and the paper manufactured from lumber. The directive mandates a traceability system with geolocation at its core. Business verifying and ensuring products entering the EU market do not contribute to deforestation. Easy enough, right? I think the best way to describe this new regulation is it's similar to FSC supply chain custody, but with stricter burden on the publisher. So, who is responsible to keep track of all of this? Well, for sure, it's going to be a team effort. However, where the EUD rubber meets the road, ultimately, publishers will be responsible to have this information documented. Here's a quick flow chart to show you how this works when printing outside of the EU. Starting from the forest, the harvester will need to provide the EUDR compliant information of the trees harvested, including the geolocation. The pulp mills will have to ensure that the lumber from the harvester does not mix with lumber from another mill that did not comply with EUDR requirements. Next, the paper mill, in turn, will have to buy pulp from pulp mills that have EUDR compliant pulp. So when someone makes when a paper mill makes paper, it's kind of like baking a cake. You have all these different ingredients, and they've worked very hard to have these ingredients just right. So your paper is exactly the same from every single run to the other. So it's very difficult for them to change the formula and still keep the same type of paper. So the paper mill applies pressure to the pulp mill, who then applies pressure to the harvester for everyone in this chain to have the correct EUDR paper. Uh, Pulp, trees, pulp, paper. Now, the EUDR paper is made. The paper is delivered to the printer, Asia Pacific, which further maintains the chain of custody to ensure the paper used in a book is EUDR compliant. And finally, you, the publisher, will import the books into the EU, and this is the operator, is the first entity in the EU that imports the books. You will then distribute your books to a trader, a bookshop, or retailer. So, what exactly are these publisher and this operator and traders? And why do we need to know this? So, the language in the EUDR directive is complex and can be confusing. Our key to understanding what the differentiation is between the operator and the trader is outlined here. So, an operator, any entity, in this case, the publisher, the importer, or its appointed representative, which imports commodities and products to the EU market. The trader is any entity, distributor, or retailer based in the EU other than the operator that trades in the imported product and ultimately sells to the European consumer. Some of you might have heard things like SME, small medium enterprise, within the EUDR documentation. The SMEs only refer to traders. Traders have different burdens of compliance within the EUDR framework. As a publisher who prints overseas, you are the operator regardless of your size, and it falls to you to be EUDR compliant. With the help of your print partner, you have collected all the necessary data. Now, where do you put it? So all this information is collected from your printer, and then you will have to place all this information in the due diligence statement, the DDS online EU portal. This is a screenshot of what the current site looks like. This is Asia Pacific's login, and you can see here specific requirements that are needed. This is a work in progress. It's not live, it's still testing. So we don't actually know what the final product will look like, but this is a good start. So all this data that you import in the DDS portal will be available to all supply chain entities, including the trader. Although the burden falls on you, the information will be coordinated by your print partner. So where do we stand now? So the regulation is scheduled to come into effect on December 30th, 2025. US and China strongly resistant to geolocational requirements, and this still remains unresolved. US and China are saying that geolocation requirements are a national security breach. EU governments and businesses have concern over the administrative and cost of burden for supplying this information, changing their papers, making all these necessary changes in order to be EUDR compliant. Although, as I previously mentioned, the DDS portal is open, it is still in the testing phase, and a lot of work needs to be completed before final implementation. So having a print partner you can trust and can count on will be more important than ever. Ask the hard questions. Can you print our projects? Content limitations and with binding requirements. Do you have a robust QC system? Set clear expectations early, delivery deadline, budget, quality, etc. Can you help us bring our idea to life? Tariffs, the 2018 legacy tariffs on products from China will continue to remain regardless of the Supreme Court's decision. The Supreme Court will only decide if the 2025 executive order and reciprocal tariffs are valid. EUDR, where it's the same thing. Many EU governments are pushing back, and with the deadline looming, many products that will be on the EU market in December 31st have already been printed in China and offshore and are already shipping or on the way to EU right now for distribution. I'm gonna pass it to Dave with questions.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll go ahead and relay them. I certainly have just a couple of questions that have come up. One is, can you explain what a reciprocal tariff is? Maybe you covered that and I missed it.
No, so a reciprocal tariff, if you remember how do um, they're basically the reciprocal tariffs are tariffs that are based on what that country is importing into the US. So for example, okay, so sorry, I don't know why I know this example. For example, Switzerland exports more into the US, meaning like the amount of money that's total amount because they export gold. So, so Switzerland, I think, is hit with a 50% tariff because the U.S. Buys more product. The total value is higher coming from Switzerland. So that's one example. So because of that, I'm not sure if I'm answering. Veronica, am I answering this correctly?
Yeah, I mean, the way I was summarizing it is it's kind of a tit for tat. The president wants to balance what we're importing versus exporting with certain countries, and based on what that country is buying from us and what we're buying from them, he came up with some numbers, and that's how he got it.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, so I think that makes it a little bit clearer. Okay, we've got a couple of questions already in the chat. I'm going to try to sort of take them in order. I was going to try to group them by tariff versus the EUDR, but we may have a little bit of back and forth on that. So we hear from Amy. Has anyone else run into the new rule by the GAPP, the General Administration of Press and Publication, where they are no longer approving unofficial content for printing in China. For example, no printing anything in China about Barbie without formal approval from Mattel. Even if we follow U.S. copyright fair use and transformative content law, we have recently been told this is no longer allowed.
I have not come across that, so I can't answer that in any form of
So, Amy, I would love it if you would email us at PubPro Network about anything that you've learned. And we can, one, look into it more, obviously, but we also just want to let folks know more about it. Christy writes, are magazines exempt from IEEPA, or is it just books?
It's printed material. So when you go to the HTS website, it's all of chapter 49. So whereas the eraser was, I believe, 46 something, so that's considered chapter 46. Informational materials are chapter 49. So that would be probably magazines would fall into that. Informational cards, like if you have a deck of cards that's has recipes or things like that, that would fall under chapter 49. So you can actually go when you go to the HTS website, you can just download the entire chapter 49. I think it's maybe like 10 pages and it clarifies all those codes.
And have you experienced anything where a publisher submitted something as being informational and that was declined? They said this, we don't consider this informational.
Um, no, I have a different kind of example though. I printed this book of this was even before this was just with the regular legacy with the legacy tariffs. So it was either 7.5 or 25. And the book was called The Notebook of Hilma af Klimt. So if you know who Hilma is, Hilma was an artist, and we did a reproduction of her notebooks, but the title was called Hilma's Notebooks. So our customs broker reached out to us to ask us, oh, is this a notebook, which would fall as 25% tariff, or is it a book? So we asked my client sent a low res PDF and we showed it to the customs broker and they're like, oh yes, this is a book. So that's the only way I've come across this. But like I said, there are, as anyone will tell you, the CBP, the Customs and Border Patrol, they're the arbiter of the codes. So if they feel like they don't agree with you, there is some leeway, but not as much as you think.
Okay, thank you. Are there any signs or concerns that books will lose their tariff exemption? I guess you need a crystal ball for that, but do you have?
I mean, my crystal ball is, I think the only way under the IEEPA, it clearly states informational material and they actually spell out CDs, microfiche, because it was written in the 70s. I don't know, it wasn't CDs, it was records, right? It must have been LPs and records considered informational material and books. So this can only be changed. So if the executive order continues to be using the IEEPA law, the only way to change that is for Congress to pass a law changing the rules, which is why you have the legacy tariffs because the Congress are the ones that are Congress is supposed to be levying tariffs and duties. So Congress needs to pass a law to change the duties and tariffs. So it's up to them.
Okay.
You do that with that.
Let's see. When we talk about the paper being certified, this isn't just tech stock. You also need to take into consideration any case wrapping the paper and also end sheets. Am I correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Someone asked a general question. There's probably too much to go into here, but what can you or your company do for publishers who want to print overseas? I think this is a sort of a introduction to how to what kind of questions to ask a potential print rep, but in general, they can contact you, and maybe Veronica, you can put contact information in the chat, and they can talk about specific projects. Okay. Do you can you talk a little bit about estimated shipping times to the UK?
To the UK, I think if they're coming from China, I feel like it seems like they're about the same as going to the US. Maybe add one week more.
Okay. And do you have sort of a general sort of outline? If we've got clients in different places around the world, you have sort of a breakdown to different ports and that kind of thing?
I mean, I think again, I think so. If you're shipping into the US, I basically it's a toss up where your shipment is going. Like if you're shipping, like I try to explain, like if you're sh because the shipment is coming from China, sometimes it's faster to go through Panama, except when Panama is having a drought and then it takes longer. So then you come through the West Coast and either truck it or do a rail across country. With other countries, we do have like a general outline of how long it takes to ship to, for example, to Australia, I think it's 2 weeks, because it's like right across, basically across the water. Um, so yeah, no, you can definitely reach out to us. I think on our website we have general information. Again, that is also changing based on the political dynamics of the world. Like when the Red Sea, and still to this point, a lot of shipments are not going through the Red Sea, everything is taking longer. So, um,
Well, this
it's not as easy to predict things as it used to be before times.
um, and that ties into the next question: are increased security concerns creating more shipping delays, and are shipping charges generally increasing?
I mean, I think right now, from what I've last heard, shipping costs are pretty steady. They've definitely come down from what they were like high of the pandemic. If any of you shipped during the pandemic, we had like some containers were $25,000, and they're meant to be like, 3,000. So, I mean, it's definitely more stable. In terms of security, I'm not the only security I'm seeing is mostly, CBP checking to see if what you have on your like your customs entry form is correct.
Okay.
I haven't that's the only thing I've seen. I have not seen increased security in terms of like looking for bad shipments. The CBP has I've noticed about the same amount of containers being held for additional checking than previously.
Carla asks, what is the value of publishing with an overseas printer versus POD printing companies that does specialty printing like Book Vault? And then they have a robust custom printing abilities in the UK and growing in the US and Australia. Cost, quality, time. If people come to you, do you help guide them on that kind of decision making?
For where to place their order or
Right, right. So if they're trying to figure out, are we going to print our books in China,
Mhm.
or are we going to print using like a high-end print on demand company that has places in the places we want them to go, like in the UK, so
Yeah.
you don't
All
have to
right,
deal with the
okay.
shipping delays and costs.
So, I mean, speaking from Asia Pacific, we do not do a lot of print on demand. We don't have any print on demand. We are a sheet fed offset printer. All of our print partners specialize in sheet fed offset. So I wouldn't be able to specifically answer that. In terms of quality, I have noticed that, digital printing and print on demand has gotten better. I don't know how much of the bling you can put on it, that if that's what you want. So, again, I think that's a conversation to be had. Most of the time when it comes to things like this, like if a client comes to me and says, I have this project, I need to have it delivered let's say today is September 16th. I need to have it delivered in Europe in, a month. I will be completely straightforward and say that we're not the people for you. It's a waste of my time. It's a waste of your time to even try to be able to make it work sometime, somehow. It's not like even printing in Turkey, for example, which would be your closest for us, your closest printer. Even with that, sh shipping will still take longer than you think. So I hope that answers. I will always be transparent over what we can achieve and cannot achieve, which I think brings me back to my previous point. When you do look for a print partner, be honest. Say, I have this project and I have a gallery opening and everything needs to be there and say, okay, well, sure, I'm happy for you. I hope it works, but we're not the people for you because I can't make this happen unless we have a time machine. So, you know.
Um, let's see, this might be more of a question for a US printer, American-based printer, but it says, are US printers gearing up and modifying capabilities to make it possible for US printers to avoid printing overseas? Is it even possible for US printers to do the kind of handwork that China does? We kind of touched on that, I think, just now. Trump seems to think this is what will happen, but how realistic is that? And are other countries seeing China's punitive tariffs trying now to take over that business?
Well, I think there was an art. I'm not sure if this is going to answer the question, but I believe there was an article. Veronica, was it the New York Times, I think, where it was game publishers because, right? So
Yeah.
game publishers up until this point have had zero tariffs because the legacy tariffs for games coming from China were zero. So now all of a sudden, they're hit with, you know, 30% tariffs on things that they never had to pay before. And most of the games that we've produced for our clients are high end. The retail value, the retail cost is $100. It's like the Settlers of Catan we don't print those. I'm just giving that as an example. Sorry, I'm being straightforward. We don't print that, but I know everyone knows Settlers of Catan. So I'm just bringing that up. So, and that, for example, now all of a sudden, went from 0% tariffs to 30% tariffs. And the article mentions some game publishers who went to Brazil and started printing, manufacturing things in Brazil. And they were saying how difficult it was to find that. And then Trump applied 50% tariffs from everything imported from Brazil. So everything they've worked for to go not have the 30% is now 50%. So I'm not sure if this answers your question, but and they said in the article, they said they have tried to find local, US suppliers. So, I think someone posted the article. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Angela. That was very kind of you.
So, yeah, I think that article probably explains it so much better than what I'm trying to say. So.
Okay. So Amy wrote, even with the tariffs, the reality is that uh, it's still less expensive to produce overseas than it is to do all of that handwork and with higher labor costs in the US. And I'm sure sort of the difference really depends on the project, right? So um, I think it's just you need to kind of on every specific project make those kinds of decisions. But yeah, I think, but part of the difficulty in all of this is for you is how good is your crystal ball, but also for the publisher who's trying to determine what happens after December, for instance, with the
Yeah.
EUDR, or what happens finally with the court case, and even if it gets rescinded and the money gets paid back, do they have the cash flow to sort of pay these added costs up front? So I think it's a hard thing, but I really appreciate everything that you talked about today, going through everything. It really just having that additional information makes it feel a little less like a guessing game than because I know it definitely can feel that way sometimes. So um, I tend to sort of freeze up when I recognize that I don't know everything that there is to know. So, and we can't know everything, obviously. So, I'm just going to take this time to say thank you. I think we've gone over everyone's questions. If I did not, feel free to email me operations@pubpronetwork.org. It's in the chat. We'll also be sending out a sort of a follow-up email to everyone who signed up with contact information for Asia Pacific, but also, we'll include the link to the New York Times article. Thank you, Angela. And anything, if you have a question, we'll try to answer it as well. So thank you so much, Simona. I appreciate it. And Veronica,
thank you.
I really appreciate it. This is exactly the kind of thing that we are trying to accomplish here at PPN, people supporting each other to make these difficult decisions. So thank you. And we will be posting the video after we don't do a lot to it, but just the basic stuff, and then we post it to our YouTube page. If you are interested in hearing more about PPN, pubpronetwork.org, there's more information there. If you want to get involved, you can email us at operations@pubpronetwork.org, and there are lots of fun things to get involved with. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Goodbye,
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.